So I just thought I'd introduce, so my name is Julie Walters. I am the Senior Project Manager for Technicamps. And so what is Technicamps for those who don't know what it is? And shame on you if you don't know what it is. Technicamps is a digital upskilling project. We work across the whole of Wales and we work with all the universities in Wales. It's been going since 2003. Long before I started, and I'm sure it'll be going a lot longer after I'm here too, because digital is moving on all the time. Our main project is a £5.3 million project. It's European funded and funded by Welsh Government, and that is to go into schools, secondary schools, and to upskill young people in all things STEM, to encourage them to take on a STEM subject post GCSE. So that's what our main thing is. We do lots of other things as part of the programme though, including a degree apprenticeship, which is a BSc in Applied Software Engineering, which is a fully funded degree programme. So we're involved in a lot of things and work with the community and do techno clubs as well. So lots going on. But today is WIST. And why that? Why women in STEM? What on earth is that about? It really is, today is a give back to you, to everybody who's here, and for those who've helped us on our journey and for those who might want to join in our journey somewhere along the line. So Women in STEM is a way of inspiring young people, especially girls. So it goes alongside our Girls into STEM programme, GIST. And that is going into schools and encouraging girls to take up a STEM subject. What's the best way of doing that is to see careers of women who are already in STEM, who are already in science, who are already doing things in this arena and saying, oh, that's really great. Who's more passionate about it than somebody already doing it? So our ambition is to take role models into schools, into their careers talks, into their options meetings, and to encourage them, and after our workshops as well, to take up a STEM subject post 16. So building this network is part of that. So if anybody's interested in that, my little plea on that one is please either drop a note in the chat and I'll check it later if you're interested in becoming a role model with us, or if or just email into info@technicamps.com and we'll get in touch with you to move that forward. So that's the WIS and the GIST programme. What are we doing today? So today we're going to hear from our lovely speaker in a minute, and that's why you've all come to learn about confidence. And I did wonder if I should have done my talk after she'd spoken and seen if it would have been a better talk, but we haven't done it that way around. So what we're going to do is we're going to have her talk, then we've got a chance for questions and answers. So if you've got any questions for Hayley, think about them as she's talking and drop them in the chat and we'll ask them of her. Okay, don't make them too hard. We don't want to frighten her totally, but I think she can take on the challenge. I think she's ready for it. So that's what we're going to do today. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction to Hayley before she speaks. Red Hat. Red Hat is a massive company. It's £1 billion. It's open source software company, if you haven't heard of it. And I think it's a subsidiary of IBM now, if Wikipedia serves me right. My little connection, or our connection in Swansea University with Red Hat is Alan Cox. Mr. Alan Cox was one of the early programmers who wrote a version of Linux back in the 1990s. And Linux is a software which is managing Amazon and eBay today, so we would not be able to survive without it. So that's a nice connection to Red Hat. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to the capable hands. Hopefully you're ready. So big drum roll, please, for Hayley Wienszczak, who is the Director, Global Alliance Partner and SAP Business for EMEA. Oh, what a title, it's a great title. Who's going to speak to us today. So it's all about confidence, so over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Julie. Thank you for such a lovely introduction, and thank you to everybody for taking some time out today. I do hope that some of the things I share today will be of useful value, resonate, and perhaps help you on your personal journeys as well as you go through your careers. I've got to say, looking in the chat, hugely impressed. A lot of variety in terms of skill sets, age groups. So hugely excited today to present to you. So let's just go. I know that that Julie introduced me, but let's just kind of quickly run through a little bit of who I am. Yes, I may have a big job title, but I'm a Brit. I like to call myself an international Brit. I'm married to an American who's of Japanese descent and Polish descent, actually. And I like to think of myself as an English Mongol. So I don't think of myself as kind of, you know, belonging in any one category. I have 2 teenage boys, 2 cats, and 16 guinea fowl that keep me entertained on this working from home mandate that we all have today. Lockdown, that's one of the challenges. We'll talk about some of this. I think we all feel that lockdown presents a new set of challenges to how we feel about ourselves, our level of confidence. So for me, you know, I've focused on things like my bread making, had a new machine. I've tried to get a lot of cycling in, and I rediscovered yoga. We all have traits, and we're going to talk a little bit about our traits. So I just wanted to share as well kind of my traits. I'm known for clarity. There's a set of 360 kind of reviews you can do to get peer feedback on how you come across. So my character strengths tend to be I'm very focused. I provide a perspective. I'm good at building trust and empathy. But you know, my motivations, what really makes me feel fulfilled and good around work is feeling that I'm belonging, but feeling that I have significance, that I'm making an impact. And all that said, you know what, I'm a human being. So when I'm under stress, I worry, I get resentful, and I can find that my confidence can get eroded as a result. And that's a little bit of what I want to share with you today. Career-wise, sorry for the bonging, but that's my mouse not working. Career-wise, so yes, 30 plus years in the IT industry, feel it some days. Quite a varied career. Actually within that, I've been an entrepreneur 4 times, running my own businesses. But also alongside that, I don't just do the job that I get paid for. I really like to do things where I can give back and to the points of my character traits, kind of have an impact beyond what I do in my day-to-day work. And this is something I think that is really important, because in your working life, you will meet challenges and you will have times and periods where sometimes it's really tough to get through. And having something in parallel that is an outlet for your passion, for what you want to achieve in life, can help sustain you through those really challenging periods. So yeah, I've been a charity trustee, a school governor, and I am a UK registered STEM ambassador. And in fact, that's how I got to know Julie. Red Hat have run for about 3 years a coding competition aimed at GCSE students. It was exactly the same remit as Technicamps, which is to really inspire students, young girls as well as boys, to take up IT as a serious career choice. When Julie and Megan approached me and said, you know, would you be happy to present? And oh, by the way, we'd like you to present on confidence. I thought, wow, you know, that's a good question. I mentor people and I coach people. I often see confidence. I often work on my own confidence as things that, you know, need addressing. But I hadn't really researched the subject that much. So it was actually a real learning path for me. So one of the things that I did research is there's a book called The Confidence Code. And Cathy Kay, who's the anchor woman for BBC News America, and Claire Shipman, who's a reporter of ABC News, are the authors of this book. And over 2 decades, they've spent covering American politics. They've interviewed a lot of very influential women in the world. And they were really surprised through all those interviews as they began to kind of review their work. They were surprised to see how much these women suffered from self-doubt. And what they really discovered was that compared with men, women don't consider themselves maybe ready for promotions. They predict they'll do worse on tests. They generally underestimate their abilities. And they also uncovered that this didn't just range from upbringing, there were biological reasons as well. There's a professor called Zach Estes who did a test, a puzzle where he basically gave men and women, a group of men and women, set the same questions to answer. And at first it looked like the women had done worse in the test. Then when he looked, he realized that the women hadn't answered vast arrays of the questions. So he reran the test and he stipulated that you had to put an answer in for every single question. When he did that, the men and women scored equally. So, you know, again, it was interesting. It was this finding that basically women would prefer to leave a blank space rather than risk giving the wrong answer. And there is a growing body of evidence that says that this lack of confidence, it can turn out to correlate closely with your success. And actually, it's confidence as well as competence that you require to be successful. And it's really, this could be one of the reasons why you still see women underrepresented in the highest levels of some organisations, of our governments, etc. So I can just see the poll results coming up now. So that's interesting, because 37% of you said, you know, speaking with authority is what you see as one of the main traits, displaying composure, focusing on their strengths. So this is going to be interesting as I share a bit more here, because I think you may kind of change your mind about what drives confidence. So let's see. Actually, what is confidence? The bridge between thought and action. So Richard Petty, who's a psychology professor at Ohio State University, has spent decades researching this subject. And he said, you know, basically it's everything that we do that turns our thoughts into action that actually build our confidence. It's the fact that if the action involves something scary, then you know, we may be less confident about, or less willing to put it into action. So you may need some other traits, but confidence is essential because it applies in more situations than anything. So you need to be confident. And the thing is that he said really is it's the belief as well in your ability to succeed. So, you know, the notion that confidence and action are interrelated, it's a virtuous circle. And that's something that I wanted to explore a bit more in my next slide. There's another set of research. So what I've done on these slides, by the way, you can go back to the source materials yourself. I've put in the sources of these articles and some of the research that I did. But Laura Gillen has done a paper for Harvard Business Review, and on that she really looked into this question that I asked you today, which is, what are the traits that really drive confidence? And she looked at both the male traits and the female traits. And, you know, the reality is that in the working world, you know, it has been predominantly a male world in many sectors, and that sets up an expectation around traits that play more naturally to male traits. So men typically, to be confident, it's expected that they would be more aggressive, they're more energetic, more determined to express themselves. And what they find with women, you know, the predominant female traits of women is we tend to collaborate more with others, we're a little bit more humble, and we actually exercise active listening. And what was interesting, so they did some research across 4,000 people worldwide, and they looked at self-confidence, mostly in technology companies. And what they found was that appearing self-confidence did not equate to influence. Now, you know, influence, the impact we have on others, how others perceive us, is critical to your career progression. So what they were basically saying was that for women, the influence was more closely tied to how perceived they were, how they were perceived as being caring or warm and approachable, versus how the men were perceived, which was, you know, go-getting, aggressive, achievement of results. And actually this requirement that women to be seen to be have influence and to be seen as confident needed to have a pro-social element and be more reaching out, which essentially means you're taking on an extra workload, because it's not typically in any job description. So the message that Laura Gillen was giving us really is that the confidence is gender neutral, self-confidence, but it's actually the consequences of how you appear and how that is perceived that actually creates the inequality in that confidence. And it's about the performance plus confidence that equals the power and influence formula that is gendered. And this is quite interesting, because we'll come onto this a bit more as well, but the environment that you work in the culture that you are around every day, be it your professional culture or your personal culture, will have an impact on, one, you know, your personal confidence, and equally how you are perceived by others and the influence that you have and the ability to push your career forward. And that, you know, can, as you can see, can become a virtuous cycle if you feel frustrated in that. If you're in an environment where you are expected to do more, measured in some ways, subconsciously in a different way, you can feel always on the back foot in terms of your confidence. So what hinders confidence? So again, another set of research by Rosabeth Cantor that appeared in 2014. But there's some commonly identified barriers. One is self-defeating assumptions. Now, we all like to think we're realistic, okay? But there's a difference between realistic and being defeated before you enter the game. And that was what we were looking at in that first survey, where the women would rather not answer the question and get it wrong than answer the question, yeah? And when they just put in an answer, they were pretty right. They were up there as right as their male colleagues were. So here, the message really is, you know, apply for it. In my personal life, there was a role that I really wanted 3 years ago at Red Hat. And I looked at the role and I looked at the job description and I went, oh, I don't know if I can do all that. I'd really like to do that job, but I'm not going to apply. It led to me a year later being hugely frustrated with my career progression inside Red Hat and having, you know, quite an open conversation with our people manager about, you know, how am I going to progress my career if you know I can't kind of get into some of these roles. And he said, well, why did you not apply? And I said, well, because I didn't have all of the criteria that were required for the role. And he said, well, and who got the role? And I, you know, knew who got the role. And I said, well, neither did they. And that was a telling moment for me, because I would rather not apply and get rejected maybe, or feel that, you know, I wasn't adequate, than just put my, you know, stick in the game and go, actually, I'm going to give it a shot. What have I got to lose? So second one, going for goals that are too big and distant. Yes, you know, I can remember, you know, my 20s going, I want to be a VP of a software company in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. It's fantastic to have these massive goals and to aim there, but don't make that goal the thing that becomes your obsessing, your measurement of your success, because often the journey is not A to B in a straight line. It's A via B, via C, via D to get to that end point. And actually you can miss a lot of opportunities on the way if you only focus on that one thing ahead of you. So breaking your goals down into smaller valued wins, things that can actually, you can go, okay, what I would like to achieve in the next 6 months, and I would actually suggest you do this on a quarterly basis, but you say in the next 3 months, if I achieve this, I feel like I'm progressing. These small incremental steps can actually help you build your confidence quicker, and the outcome will look after itself. Yeah, I think there's an old saying that says, you know, if you look after the pennies, the pounds will look after themselves. Yeah, and this, in terms of building your confidence, is one of those areas where I'd say it applies. You know, declaring victory too soon. You know, again, this is kind of, this one I found harder, to be honest, to kind of relate to. You know, I do, so here's the thing. I would like, and I've said to my boss, I would like her job one day. Yeah, it's like, that's what I'd aspire to. But actually, you know, when I look at it, it's like, be careful what you wish for. And when you get a job, that's only just the beginning. Actually, what you have to do to really build your confidence is to do it well, deal with the challenges in it, and again, take it step by step. You know, so what I learned in that journey is, I felt 2 years ago when I started in this current role, oh, you know, I can do this. My boss's job isn't that hard. What I've learned in doing my job is, I've learned a lot. I learned many things that I didn't know I needed to learn. Yeah, so I'll be in the moment a bit. Don't go for these big milestones, I would say, and then say, wow, I'm there. live in the moment and take the pleasure again from the things that are happening real time. Now, this next one is a classic one, and I am really bad at this, the do-it-yourselfing. You know, thinking that, you know, if I just have the willpower, if I do it all myself, it'll be done right. I can do it all myself and I will achieve what I need to achieve. I can tell you, after 30 plus years, the reason I am here today is because I've had the support of some amazing people. I've had the support of some really good bosses. I've had good mentors. I've had friends, you know, people to talk to at points when I've been low, when I've been frustrated. And I've had formal career development. I've had formal training. Your career is not an individual sport, is what I would say to you. Figure out who your team are and, you know, engage that team and recognize that team. Your team may change from step to step in your career, but there is a team, and there is a team that can really support you, and you can support them. And when it comes to confidence, supporting others can actually be a great confidence builder. So this is a win-win if you play this as a team sport. Blaming somebody else, you know, here's the thing, at the end of the day, stuff happens, we get challenges, things go wrong. I had a real low period in my career. It was about 2.5 years ago. I knew at the time that I was working for a manager who I was increasingly finding it particularly hard to work for. And in fact, at that point, I considered leaving the company. I was actively looking for a new role. I didn't reach out. I was do-it-yourselfing as well at the time. And then in a moment, my boss was gone, and I was in this situation where I was getting a lot of feedback about me and my style and how I was working with a team. And I didn't recognize that person. And what I realized was that, you know, I was kind of blaming my situation, blaming my boss at the time, but I hadn't really taken responsibility for myself and my team in that. It was a real wake-up call for me. So yes, you know, it feels good. Yes, there are things that are outside your control that happens, but I always say, take responsibility, consider the choices that you have. Yes, you know, get over it, move on. Don't let what happens at any point control then what you do next in terms of making sure you get a positive outcome. And we'll just come back to that a little bit more at the end. Defensiveness. This is the other thing. And sometimes I think this is where sometimes, you know, I really support bringing women up in STEM. I'm part of our Women Leadership Council. I'm part of Women in Technology groups. I always get a little bit uncomfortable when we get a little bit aggressive about the men versus women thing. I just, again, see it as a team sport. I think we've got to all figure out how to work together. And I feel sometimes that actually what drives that is a defensiveness, that in our defensiveness, we start to attack. And actually, you know, if we can find a good place, if we're feeling good within ourselves, we're able to take a more measured kind of view of what we're hearing, how people are reacting to us, and realize actually that sometimes we have a lot more power than we think we have to impact others and to bring about the outcome that we need. And this comes back to also realizing that those traits that we have as women, those naturally collaborative traits, those active listening skills, actually put us in a very strong position to be strong leaders going forward. So if you find yourself being defensive, think about, oh, that's a trigger. That's possibly that I'm not confident. Okay. And then that's causing me to react. And actually that creates one of these negative cycles where you're viewed as not confident. You get frustrated because you're not progressing. People don't view you in the way that you think you should be coming across. Neglecting to anticipate setbacks. I think probably that we all have this. We all want to kind of go for optimism. Optimism is great. Optimism is a great way of building confidence and always seeing that something's going to come out. If you believe an outcome's going to happen, yeah, you can make it happen. But the reality is there's normally a few hurdles on the way, maybe some big brick walls. So be realistic. Don't be realistic to our earlier point of not trying, but just be aware of what can happen and then be prepared to be agile, to be flexible and to work with it, not to fight it. We all, and I have certainly wasted a lot of energy in my career fighting things that I should have just embraced and figured a way around. Okay, you know, that's, again, an area for you to think about in the workshop. And the last one is overconfidence. You know, I think there's a quote here that says, confidence is the sweet spot between despair and arrogance. So, you know, this is not easy. Okay. It's not easy to manage. I think the best way to really kind of moderate this is to have some humility, be authentic, be real. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. Don't, you know, sometimes they say, walk the walk, talk the talk. Yes and no. I think, you know, if you're true to yourself, the confidence you build will be more authentic. The perception of others of you will be more authentic. You will actually be stronger to work on the areas that you want to work on. Elizabeth Moss kind of finished off by saying, you know, confidence is the art of moving on. I would also add, to be mindful, my tip to you would be discerning about the company you choose. And I mean that in terms of the company of the people that you spend your time with, both in your personal and your professional environments. You know, I've been in some companies. One of my companies I was in for 6 months because the culture wasn't right. I couldn't thrive there. I just felt that these people didn't have the same values as me. This wasn't the way that I wanted to lead my working life. In those situations, be bold, because you spend a lot of time in the company of others, be it at work or some, you know, other personal circumstances. So it is important to make sure that those areas of your life where other people have influence on you, that influence is not overly negative. Of course, there'll be negative aspects. View that as practice, but don't surround yourself in an environment where actually you feel like you're the one lone voice. Okay, again, it's a team sport. So somebody else can often help you. A mentor can often help you see that. If you have a mentor and you discuss with them, they can help you look at that outside in. So I know I said, you know, confidence is the art of moving on. You're going, yeah, right. That sounds pretty simple to say. So I just wanted at the end of the formal part of the presentation to really share this quote. This quote is something that that our CEO of Red Hat EMEA, Werner Knoblich, brings up at every single one of our sales kickoffs, and it really resonates to me. And I think this, for me, is what helps me move on, because, you know, Maya Angelou, famous American poet, said, people will forget what you said and they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And if you think about that for yourself, you know, think back about some people you've known you haven't seen for a long time. What's the first thing that actually happens when you think about people or circumstances? How did you feel in that circumstance? So actually, you know, if you do something and it didn't work, if something failed, it's not the fact that it failed that necessarily is going to be remembered. It's the fact of what you did next. So in this, one of the things I learned in that experience that I had 2.5 years ago, where I had, you know, a great self-realization and had to take ownership for a lot of things that I was blaming others for, I had a really, really supportive boss. And she said to me, Hayley, be kind to yourself. And this is something that when we strive for our careers and we strive to achieve things, sometimes we forget to be kind to ourselves. And actually just, you know, take a moment and go, yes, you know, listen to the feedback by all means, and take it as feedback. It's an information point. Register it, maybe resolve to take some actions, but look forward to the next step. Just assume that people around you are being positive as well. That helps the optimism, but it also helps your perspective so that you don't become too defensive. And this to me, this quote has always been the heart of a principle of how to move forward, how to do these things. And you know what? If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. It was a learning experience. Move on to the next thing. Maybe come back to this presentation or come back to your mentor, discuss it and find a way to move on. So, you know, and I would say for me, you know, we've all seen what's been going on in America. I of course have an interest, an American husband and 2 dual nationality sons, but take a look at Joe Biden's new team. Yes, Joe Biden has a huge, huge job to do in America, but what he's recognized is he needs to grab hearts and minds. He needs to bring people on a leadership journey where people feel collaborated with and people feel connected with. He has the first Native American cabinet member who's running the national parks. His communications office is all women. He has more women. He has the first woman vice president and the first woman Asian descent vice president. So that is a role model for me. The two extremes have just been exhibited about a good culture, toxic culture, and the good culture in the American presidency. We've gone from a toxic culture to an environment where people can start to thrive. And if you create an environment where teams can thrive, everybody thrives. Yeah. So that's kind of the end of my formal sharing. So, you know, over really to everybody now. Megan, I've not been able to track the Q&A, but yes, hopefully something there has resonated for everybody in the audience today, and happy to take some questions.
I've got one for you, if I'm allowed to ask one.
Go for it.
How confident do you feel today on a scale of 1 to 10? You asked everybody else and you asked everybody to judge you, but you haven't actually told us yourself how you feel.
Yeah, do you know what? I rated myself at about a 5 today. The reason being is actually I was a little bit nervous presenting to everybody today. You know, I always, you know, want to do well. You know, I want people to feel that it was of value, and share, and it's also to me it's quite hard in this virtual environment. It would have been lovely to have been face to face with people and connect with you. So that's always harder. And do you know what? I didn't have a great night's sleep last night. My teenage son was up, had something to deal with, and so I had real life going on. You know, so you know these things all eat away a little bit at our confidence. And I'm a human being, but yeah, I don't know what I was scored actually, Megan, in the thing. How confident did I come across?
It was a 9. We scored you a 9.
Wow. Well, there you go. I think that's a good evidence. I wasn't feeling as confident as I was coming across.
That wasn't clear.
I'm certainly performance but plus confidence equals power and influence is going to be my new mantra, I think. I like that, and I'm going to have to go away and read the confidence code because I haven't read it yet. Yes, I agree with Sarah's big heart, definitely, for Hayley on that one.
Are we ready for a couple of questions, Hayley?
Yeah, go for it.
The first one, do you think female confidence levels vary depending on their professions? I noticed my sister and her friends in law are quite confident and good communicators.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, so absolutely, yes. I think if you're in a profession where it's heavily male dominated and there are not a lot of female role models, then it's much harder to be confident, or that confidence comes back to some of those traits we talked about that could be built on something that's not really true confidence. It's interesting when the law profession, because the law profession, you are taught a lot of the skills that would naturally enable you to come across as confident. So you're taught how to debate and argue your point in the public environment. You know, you're taught the public speaking skills. You have to be thorough in putting your case across. So in some ways they're not comparable, because you know, it'd be interesting actually, you know, to do that survey perhaps with your sister or other colleagues to say how confident they actually feel when they're doing that versus how they come across. Like me today, you know, I'm presented to you, you assumed I'm confident, but actually I'm not feeling that inside. So yes, that's kind of how I perceive it. And I think it's natural as humans to want to compare ourselves to others. So that's where I think, you know, if you're in and working in a role where you don't feel confident, or you feel that it's more governed by the male criteria, find yourself some mentors. And by the way, don't just find yourself female mentors, find a male mentor, because it'll help them as well. But it'll also help you translate what you need to do in that role, in that industry. You know, I'm thinking, I saw some people in engineering backgrounds, etc. You know, those can be tougher industries, I think. But I can tell you, after 30 years in the IT industry, well, I can tell you, when I took what was O-level computer science, it was the first year it ran in the UK, so I'm revealing my age. I was the only girl that put her hand up to do O-level computer science. And at that point, my maths teacher said, "Are you sure?" And actually, I had to bring my dad in to convince him that I was sure. Okay, now I have not looked back from that. And I can remember going into jobs when I was first a marketing manager in my first role in DataFlex, and I was the only woman in the meeting rooms and all the men were older, more experienced men, and here I was, this young upstart female. So, you know, what I think what is important is, don't compare yourself too much. Focus on what you want out of the role. Is that environment helping you get that role? And focusing on what you can achieve and how that builds you as a person. And if that environment, and you haven't got mentors, or they're not supporting you in the business, then this is a business to maybe consider moving into a separate role. And let me give the other side of my career. When I went back from running my own businesses for 4 years, and my son went into, he got a scholarship, and I went, okay, probably need a more regular income, you know, this is going to be more expensive for us to support as a family. So I went, do you know what, I've always wanted to step back into my career. Now's the decision point. So I made the decision that I wanted to step back into a more conventional career path in the IT industry. My first decision criteria in stepping back, because I'd run my own businesses, okay, so I wasn't convinced I could work in an environment where I had bosses and bosses of bosses. What I did is I looked in my LinkedIn, and I looked for people who I enjoyed working with, who I respected, and I looked what companies they were at. And there was one company that stood out, and that was Red Hat. And I'd worked at SCO, so a lot of people have gone there. A lot of people Sybase have gone there. But I figured that the culture was good. And that was the only company, by the way, I applied to. And I got myself a contracting job, and then I converted it to a full-time job. Because for me, and this would be something when I said, you know, consider the company you keep, it is about that environment. If you're in an environment where you feel that you're just not going to be confident, then, you know, at some point go, do you want to be the one person pushing water uphill? Which I'm not saying don't go for and don't achieve, but bring a team together to do it. But if not, pick the company by the culture, or look for a company that has a desire. So they're building women in technology teams, or they've got diversity inclusion on the agenda, and they're working for this. You know, I noticed that there's people at Accenture and IBM, etc., in the audience today. All these companies have these sort of groups which can bolster you in your chosen career path.
We've had quite a few questions, 5 or 6 of them, about rebuilding confidence after being on maternity leave.
Oh, yes. That's a tough one. Really good question. So that is tough. And I think this, you change as a person when you have children. At least, well, do you change? Your terms of reference change. What matters to you changes. I remember knowing, you know, the instant that my first son appeared was the world went upside down, and there wasn't anything I wouldn't do to protect my child. And that was all that mattered, their health, their well-being, etc. And all of a sudden, this stuff at work suddenly became not important and futile and just, you know, pathetic some days. And the other thing I found is the longer I stayed out, so when my son was born, he needed some help around some needs that he had, and I chose to take 2 years out of work to focus completely on helping him on that journey and kicking off his life journey, hopefully in a good way. And for me, you know, I built up kind of my own businesses because it was comfortable. You know, I was in control. I felt that I wasn't pushing myself too hard, and I wasn't divided too hard. But I remember when I went back into the work environment, my confidence, I really did feel that I wasn't good enough. And I think, here's the thing, you may have had children, but you didn't have a lobotomy, okay? The skills that are there, the brain is there. It's just the fact that your context and your terms of reference are slightly different. But actually, I can argue with you that it's a strength, because what it gives you is the ability to be a bit more objective about the work environment and keep it in balance, and look at it and go, is this worth my energy? You know, do I need to put all this time into that? So I would at that point make sure, again, that you pick a company that supports women coming back into work, and make sure that you're in an environment where the boss supports that. I know you can't always, you might, you know, be going back after maternity leave to a job, but then in that case, reach out. I mean, there's a bunch of people here today. This is a network. You know, I'd encourage everybody who wants to link in with me, link in with others, but don't be afraid to reach out and ask somebody else about how they're doing, and get a mentor at that point to discuss and help you process what you feel and your anxieties and the things you struggle to deal with. I tell you what, this pandemic has been brilliant for working mothers and working parents, actually, because there are plenty of single fathers out there coping with balancing childcare and homeschooling as well. And what it's made is a level playing field, because at the end of the day, we've all been put in that same boat. Even if you don't have kids, managers and leaders across the business have suddenly had to deal front and foremost with the fact that the majority of their team do, and the majority of their team are having to struggle. And in these companies, what we're trying to do is keep people engaged and motivated and productive. But if we don't look after the individual, they won't be any good to the business or themselves. So actually, we've had to adapt very much more quickly to this flexible working environment. I think the challenge to us now is to hold on to this. Yeah, it's not to let it go back to the normal of, do you need to be in an office to do your job, to be effective, to be productive, or can you actually do much better in balancing? And should we allow parents much better work-life balance and much more flexible working hours? Absolutely. And this is something that we all have to kind of drive forward.
Thank you. Another common theme in the questions is finding the balance between being able to give constructive feedback, but also being liked. I'm worried about being liked by colleagues. That's something you can explain.
Oh God, yeah, that's tough. I hate having to give feedback that isn't, you've got to give constructive feedback, but the messaging you're delivering isn't necessarily going to land very well. So look, yes, we all like to be liked. Why do we like to be liked? Because it validates ourselves. And it's another way of bolstering our confidence. So just recognize it and go, do you need that? Or actually, is it more important, if you are needing to give feedback to somebody, that is, it's about making it better for you and them. Okay. And if you have to give somebody negative feedback about something they can do, I think it has to come from a place of good intent. Even if that message is, I'm sorry, but you're, and I have had to make people redundant. I have had to tell people and put them onto performance plans, and I've had to give them, some pretty harsh feedback on other stuff. But what is important is to be fair, to be empathetic and compassionate about it. Okay, and try to be as non-judgmental. It's a very emotional situation, so you need to prepare yourself before you ever go into a meeting like that. And by the way, if you're in a situation where you're on the receiving end and you're getting some negative feedback, what I would recommend to you is, if you feel really emotional at the time, and you're going to, when some of these situations, one of the feedback sessions, that one I talked about 2.5 years ago, I burst into tears because I didn't recognize the person. I couldn't talk, I couldn't process. My manager was really good, and she said, go away, Hayley, think about it. We'll talk about this a bit more in a couple of weeks' time. She gave me the time to process, recognize that you need time to process feedback, and the people you're giving feedback to need time to process as well. Now, in formal processes, companies have support mechanisms that go around employees around redundancies, etc. In feedback processes, recognize the same. If that person you're having to give feedback to hasn't got a mentor or something else, get some support around them as well.
That ties in with a few questions we've had about imposter syndrome, and if you have any advice on overcoming that.
Oh yes. Do you know what? I have had that on and off for the last year in this new role. It's a big role, so I manage parts of the business that are, bringing in tens of millions of dollars of revenue, these two businesses. Okay. So, it's a big responsibility. I have two teams, one that's in a very dynamic part of the business, one that's in a very, kind of laggard part of the business. And one was a team that needed re-energizing, and the other team were just like, hold on to the reins because they're all about a bunch of A players. So very diverse. And I've had moments where I go, am I doing this right? It happens. I think for me, it's part of my DNA. I accept now that I'll ask myself, am I doing this all right? But what I have to do is go, well, what is the outcome? So you can do that many ways. Company like Red Hat has employee associate survey. So once a year, you get the feedback, how you're doing as a manager, whether you want it or not. But you can seek feedback from others. And I would say that this is really important. And I don't think I really brought this out in my presentation, but close link between building your confidence and going on a journey of self-awareness. the only way that you can be comfortable in your skin, you know, and I've got to say, in my 50s, I finally feel a little bit more comfortable in my skin, a little bit more forgiving of myself. I wish I'd learnt these skills, you know, 20, 30 years ago. And the only way I do that is by getting the feedback from others. So to get on the front foot, ask somebody, say, you know, I'd just like a bit of feedback. We work together a lot on this. You know, can you give me feedback how I come across? And then you can get things to work on that are tangible, rather than you niggling away at your own self-doubt and then trying to sustain that by thinking, well, if I'm liked by everybody, that'll do the trick on confidence. Catch yourself. You know, I'm a naturally kind of bright person. I like people to smile and laugh. I can't be over serious. So my team now know that about me. People often make the mistake with me. They think that, you know, I'm not going to be kind of hard and I'm not going to be that serious, but I do have that side. I choose not to deploy that side because that's not where I'm naturally comfortable. So I'm trying to be authentic as a leader of people, and that makes me comfortable, which actually gives me a more solid base for my self-confidence.
Thank you. A nice question here is, do you find yourself taking on the traits of your male colleagues, and how is that perceived?
Oh, not good. Yes, I've done that. I've definitely in some of my younger years. I don't think I do it now. I think, and I still see women that do it. And, you know, you've got it. I think when you do that, it inherently comes across as you're trying to be something you're not, but the male instinct then is to revolt against that. You've got to remember that, you know, men are you know, very close typically to their mothers and see women as more nurturing. So actually you're better off using those skills to gain your influence in an organization. And one of the tips I give to teams and in meetings, so when you're in a meeting and you come in and sit down, you'll often notice a difference between how men and women sit at a table and how people want to talk. So sometimes, you know, you can try and get in there and you can try and be the loudest voice and shout down because you think that that's the way to get it, because you think that that will give you influence. I would say, don't try to be something you're not. Don't try to mimic those skills as a way to get the influence. Yeah, we talked about that. The influence is related to the confidence and the purveyance of confidence, and those confidence actually plays into those female traits. So I always say to people, do you know what? All the gorillas around that desk at some point give up beating their chests. There's a natural pause in conversation. Whatever you've got, use all that time to absorb, inform yourself, give yourself the knowledge, and then wait for that moment and that natural pause, make your point. It has huge impact. It comes across as considered. You've been an active listener, which most of us women are good at being, because just is the role we have in life. Yeah. But you're actually creating influence, and you'll have more power that way than you realize. I don't know if that helps, but that's been my experience. Yeah, it doesn't work to be something you're not, essentially. But if you are naturally more the tomboy, if you are naturally male, I'm not saying don't be that way either. If it works for you and you generally are respected, then that works for you. But I can say for me and many women I know, it doesn't work.
I think we've got time for one more question, if you've got one. Have we got another one there or not?
Yeah, there are loads here, but I've just picked one. Any advice for people in the early stages of their career with regards to confidence, learning, and not knowing what an end goal may be?
So I would say, keep being curious. Don't worry about not knowing. Ask as many questions as you can. Yeah. Don't feel bad about asking questions. I lead 2 large businesses. I can't possibly know what's going on. I may be a director at Red Hat, but trust me, I do not know everything. And every day I have to ask questions to understand and to do my job well. So I would say to you at the beginning of your career, don't be afraid and don't worry about asking questions. Questions show that you're curious, that you're trying to understand. And through that, you gain the knowledge and the understanding. And the other thing I would say is connect. Don't be a lone wolf. So find yourself a peer or a mentor or a support, but find yourself a trusted network so that they can help you process and learn about yourself and that environment you're in, and give you hints and tips on how to kind of process, use that information and be effective. And that will really help build your confidence.
Fab. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think what we're going to do now, I mean, there's so many questions there and there's so many really great answers you've given us, which is fantastic. What I think is that we'll have to put some, we'll have to pick your brains, Hayley, and ask you to answer some of those, and we'll put that script up somewhere on the website so that people can have a look at that and see if they get some more answers, questions answered.